Evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we are learning Maseches Bava Metzia Daf Samach Gimel, getting deeper into the sugyas of this parak of Ezu Neshech, of what actually are we talking about in our Mishnah, what are the cases of ribbis that we are describing, and in particular, what we're discussing today is the very last line of our Mishnah. Our Mishnah can be found at the open of the parak on Samach Amud Beis, and we're analyzing it here on Samach Gimel Amud Aleph, but the end of our Mishnah told us a case of what is tarbis, and it's just helpful, very helpful actually, to reread the case in our Mishnah just so we have it clear. We had said that the case was on the third line of the Mishnah was lakach emenu chitin b'dinar zohav hakur. I gave you 25 silver coins for a kur's worth of wheat, and that was the market value at that time, v'chein ashar. And amdu chitin b'lama dinarim, and then before I had the opportunity to give you the chitin that you paid for, the cost of dinar went up to 30. So Amar lo tein li chitai. The guy said, all right, I want to get my wheat now. Shani rotza lemochan v'likach b'hen yain. Look, I paid 25. I want what we agreed for you to give me, which right now happens to be worth 30. So please give it to me. And Amar lo, the seller said, I accept the 30 that I owe you, and I want to give you wine because I know that that's what you want. I'll just give it to you. So the halacha is that if he has it in stock, then that's mutter, because that's just a regular sale. And v'yayin ein lo, but if in fact there is no wine in stock, so then everything transfers into a loan, and then it becomes problematic. Now, yesterday on Samach Beis Amud Beis, we learned in the top, most of the top of the page, we learned two shitas, one of Rabba, which was a case where of a balcho, and where we had a shift in the case where there was a balcho, and then there was Abaye's answer, which was quite complicated, and now we're going to reject Abaye's answer and come back to answer number 3. So what were some of the challenges with yesterday's issue? Amar le Rava, we're 8 lines from the bottom on Samach Beis Amud Beis, and we are really right in the middle of a sugya. So the Gemara says, Amar le Rava, what's that? Oh, Amar le Rava, Yahachi, Tein li chitai, it should be dmei chitai mi baile. What do you mean tein li chitai? Because if, according to Abaye, we were not talking about giving over the wheat, but giving the value of the wheat, giving the money of the wheat, then the language of our Mishnah is wrong. So he says, you're right, t'nid dmei chitai, we should change the language of our Mishnah. We've seen these machlokos before, where Rav and Abaye have different shitas about how far they go in regards to their willingness to change text. Not for now. What do you mean, Shani Mochran, that I'm going to sell? According to you, Abai, it should have been a past tense. We're already sold. He says, you're right. You're right. You should change the Mishnah again, says Abai. Rav asks again, what do you mean? You never gave me the chita. I gave you 25. And by the time you got around to giving me anything, the chitim were worth 30. They didn't change price. The wheat that you got was always going to be worth 30. So says the Gemara, really, this is the shita of Abaye. So then he just teaches and says, this is how we weave together everything. For the cash value of the wheat, which really you owe me in the form of 30 dinar. Says the Gemara, that can't be, because it says our Mishnah said that we started out by paying 25, not paying 30. So with this, Rava rejects Abaye, and the Gemara at the bottom of Samach Beis Amud Beis, 2 lines from the bottom, now gives its final answer to how we understand our Mishnah. And in particular, what was bugging the Gemara at the top of this page, at Samach Beis Amud Beis, that we spoke about yesterday, was why is it that the Isser Derabanan was specifically where Yayin Ein Lo? And we're going to come back to an answer that we discussed yesterday. This is actually quite similar to Rabbah, and it goes like this. Rava says, Rava says that when he is to die, he says of himself that when I die, Rabbi Oshaya Nafak Levasi, Rabbi Oshaya is going to come out of the pearly gates to greet me. Turning to the top of Samach Gimel Amud Aleph. Why? Dimitaratzna masnisen kavasei. Because I, said Rava, when I translate Mishnayos, when I answer up for Mishnayos, I answer up Mishnayos like Rav Oshaya's brisos. So Rav Oshaya is going to be very happy. a little, I mean, it may be true as a theme. We've seen this kind of line before in Shas. That sounds pretty familiar. We saw it recently. Yeah, we saw it in Bava Kama. So the Gemara says that he speaks on behalf of Rabbi Shai. He thinks in a similar way, apparently. How did it apply here? Top line of Samach Gimel Lamed Aleph. The Tani Rabbi Shai. This is a multi-layered brisa that explains our Mishnah. Because remember what Rav is doing. Rav is trying to explain why is it that in our Mishnah we only have the Isser of Tarbis if the guy doesn't have the wine. That was the case in our Mishnah. So it says the Gemara on the second line. Harei shaynoshe bechaber mana. I owe you 100. V'halach v'amar al gorano. And then I go and wait by your goran. V'amar tainli ma'osai. I should say, you owe me 100. So I say to you, you give me 100. Shani rotza likach ben chitin. I want my money so that I can go buy wheat. And what do you say back to me? I have wheat. I'll give it to you. I don't have it on me, but I'll give it to you. Say va'asan alai kishar shalachshav. Let's look at the ticker on the bottom of the screen. Whatever wheat is in this very moment, that is what will establish the price at Shalom Yisrael. When the time came to pick up the wheat, the price had changed. The market's great right now. The chitin are more valuable. So the same chitin that I paid for will get me more wine. So I say to you, who owes me money, I said, I want wheat. Oh, no, you know what? I'll do one better for you. I'll actually give you the wine that you want. The Gemara says that I'll match you wine at today's prices. Everything will be fine. And then fine. Time has come to collect the wine. This guy keeps kicking the can down the road. He doesn't want to get rid of his product. He says, I want my wine. Why? Because the market is great right now. Similar as before. So I want the wine is great. The wine is even more than it was when we started. So because that's true, I want to be able to go buy some oil. Now, in all of these cases, here's how it started. You owe me 100. So you say, Phil, don't worry. I'll give you the 100. I say, good. I come down to the goran, to the threshing floor. I say, give me grain. Why am I coming to you now? Because grain is more valuable now. So the grain that I paid for is more valuable than what I invested. I gave you 100. The grain is now worth 120. You're just giving me the grain, which is what we agreed to. There's nothing wrong with that. Give me the grain. You say, you know what, Phil? I'm not going to give you the grain. I'll give you the wine. Okay, say there, then I'll take the wine. A couple of days later, I come to get the wine. Now the wine is not 120. The wine is 140, which is great for me because I'll take the wine and go buy oil. All of this is mutter on one condition. Says the Gemara, Kulam, in all of these cases, we are a quarter of the way down on Samach Gimel Lamed Aleph, Im Yeshlo mutter. He has it in stock, it's mutter. Ein lo aser. What does that sound like? That is exactly our last case in the Mishnah. That's why Rava said that Rav Oshaya is going to greet him at the pearly gates, because he explained our Mishnah, he touched our Mishnah, just like the Brisa of Rav Oshaya. There's no problem. If I give you 100 and you owe me 100's worth of wheat, and when you give me that wheat, it is now worth 120. That's not ribbis. That was a sale. I gave you money. By the time you managed to give me the product was worth more. That's not ribbis. That's business. That's just life. That's just the way things are. On one condition, that you have the item in stock. But if you don't have the item in stock, then the money I gave you is not a business transaction. Now it converts to a loan. And then when you pay me later, you paid me ribbis. That is the second case of our Mishnah. That is how, and answer number 3 on the Gemara. We had Rabba and Abaye yesterday. We had Rava today, and this answers up the question. Exactly. If you owe me wine, but you don't have it in stock, so if you don't have it in stock and you say, but I'll get it to you, no, that means that my money that I gave you is now no longer a business transaction. Now it's a loan, and with a loan, ribbis is usher.
But if you set up that I'm giving you the money today to pick it up in 30 days, the value changes. There's nothing wrong with that.
As long as you have access to it at any moment to pay it.
Pay.
Who are you? Sorry.
I'm the buyer.
Yeah. So as long as I am able to give it to you at any time, in theory, I can't not have the product. I have to have access to the product.
So it's not like
it has to be gettable. It has to be accessible to me as the seller. That's this din over here.
Even if it's the first thing?
No. The first thing, it's only when we flip items. Right. It's only when we flip items. So if I give you 100 and you owe me 100 of wheat, you just owe me 100 of wheat. But when your 100 of wheat is now going to transfer over to something else, so then we fall into the ribbis issues. Rob?
What's the difference between this case and the last case if the answer is the same?
Yesterday's answer?
Yeah.
Yesterday's answer was not the same. Yesterday's answer was that Abaye had a whole knech where the chitim in the middle turned into a separate chov. It was a little bit more lumdish. It was a much more complex answer than this. This is very simple. Business transactions don't have ribis. Loans have ribis. Much simpler.
Learned that already.
That was Rabba's answer, very similar to answer number 1 yesterday, not answer number 2. Okay. That's true, and that requires Rishonim to distinguish between the two, but they're very, very similar. Even in the shiur I was listening to from Rabbi Resnick today, he said, we're now going to learn Rava, who is very similar to Rabba. So great catch. Yes, that's correct. Now, the Gemara only has one tiny little problem with this answer. You want to say that the Mishnah on Samech Amud Beis is talking about a loan. That's when ribis takes place. But if you look at our Mishnah, on line 3, it says, Ketzat, lakach heimenu chitin bedinar. What does the word lakach mean? That means to buy. You don't buy things in a loan. You borrow. So asks our Gemara a quarter of the way down, umay lakach. If you want to say that Tarbis in our Mishnah is talking about a loan, that's great. I understand misvara, why you'd want to say such a thing. But the text of our Mishnah says lakach. So the Gemara gives a dachuk answer. The Gemara says, lakach behalvaso. He took in loan form. But it doesn't say lava, that he borrowed. Okay, well, the Gemara doesn't seem to be bothered too much with this. It might just be kind of jargony. Okay, well, I come take my money, right? As opposed to come borrow my money. So that's kind of how the Gemara answers. Omar Rava. Rava says we now accept the answer of Rabbi Shaya. And Rava, it's really Rava's answer. Rava says, Shma minam mid Rabbi Shaya tlas. From this brayso of Rabbi Shaya, the last 10 lines of our learning, we learn 3 things. Shma minad ma'amidin malve al gabe peros, that a loan can be paid back with product instead of with money, that's acceptable. Below amrina, and we do not say when we pay back with product, deloki isra habaliyadu, that it says, oh, the money is nowhere to be found. We just allow the payback to be with product. That's A. Ushma mina hu diyeshlo, like our Mishnah and like this brisa. Rav Oshaya teaches us that it's only true when you have the product in hand. Otherwise, it will be ribis derabanan. Ushma mina isa de Rabbi Yanai. It also means that we hold like the sheet of Rabbi Yanai that we have not learned before. What is the sheet of Rabbi Yanai? Almost halfway down on Samech Gimel Amud Aleph, Amar Rabbi Yanai. Mali hein, mali dman. I don't care if it's the item itself, and I don't care if it's the financial equivalent of the item itself. If I lend you $100 and you want to pay me back in pennies, no problem. You want to pay me back in a goat? Also no problem. It doesn't matter. You just have to pay back an equivalent of 100. Can't be more, can't be less, because it's a loan. You have to be exacting. You want to pay back in silver pieces? No problem. Go put it on a scale. Figure out the cost per ounce. Keep dropping ounces into the scale till you get to $100. Whatever. It's just, you can return however you want. Itmar. This is actually a machlokes in one way. The Gemara says as follows: Rav Amar osin amona beperos. When we talk about amana in the Gemara, it means to basically to prepay. So I'm going to give you money before you give me the item. Says the Gemara, osin amana beperos vein osin amana bedamim. I can give you money today with the assumption that you'll give me the fruits tomorrow. That's fine. But I'm not going to give you money today. I'm not going to give you money today so that you're going to try and find peros. But if you fail, then you give me cash. That's not allowed, says Rav. However, that's subject to a machlokes because Rabbi Yanai Amar Mali Heinu Mali Dmayan. We see over here that our brayso of Rav Oshaya is like Rav Yanai, who says it doesn't matter how you get paid back. It doesn't matter if it's pennies, Bitcoin. It doesn't matter. Pay however you want. Mesve, we're going to have a kasha now on Rav. We had said a moment ago, kulam, in all cases, this was the end of the brayso of Rav Oshaya, im yeshlo, that if in fact they did have it in stock, then it would be mutter. So why does Rav say, eino sanamana b'damim? The brayso of Rav Oshaya seems to imply that you can pay back with anything. The Gemara says, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav, b'shem moshach. We're talking about a case scenario where there was mashicha, where the person actually did a kinyan. Says the Gemara, if there's a kinyan, then you've taught me nothing. Says the Gemara, I don't need Rav to tell me that if you do Mashiach, it works, and if you don't, then it doesn't. That's regular kinyan stuff. That's relative to what we're learning. Child's play, that you can do a kinyan with Mashiach. That's obvious. Says the Gemara, no, it's a little bit different. It's It's that I kept the items that I wanted to give to you in a corner. I didn't really do Mashiach. I kind of earmarked it, I put it off to the side, but no kinyan was actually done. So that's one possible answer. Ushmuel Amar Hamani, he says, what's going on over here in the Brisa? Rabbi Hudahi. Do Amar Tzad Echad Beribis Mutter. Okay. The principle of Tzad Echad Beribis Mutter means that if we have a transaction that can go one of two ways, one way where money transacts evenly, I give you 100 and you return 100. Or there's another way that things will play out, which is that I give you 100 and then the way chips fall, I get back 120. Because there's two possible outcomes as to how the case could fall out, that's called ribis. That's tzad echad beribis, and that's mutter. A little bit. Let me just say it again. It's a little nuancy. Let's say that I borrow $100 from you, and I can either pay you back and the market will be flat, we're even, or I could pay you back and the market won't be flat, and you pulled an interest. Rabbi Yehuda says that that's mutter even if the money comes back with interest. Why? Because it wasn't definitely going to happen that way, and nor was it my intention. It's kind of like davar she'eino miskaven in Hilchos Shabbos. I don't want it, I don't intend for it, but if it happens, it happens. And we paskin l'kula like Reb Shimon that davar she'eino miskaven is mutter. So that's what tzad echad.
Certain amount of wheat, which today is 100, but a month.
Let's do better than that. Let's look at the brisa because the Gemara is now just saying tzad echad beribis mutter. What? Yeah, the Tanya. The Brisa writes as follows: we're 2/3 of the way down on Samech Gimel Amud Aleph. Haresha I know I owe you $100. And the way it works out is that you can take my field. Bisman sheha mocher ochel peros, when the seller is the one eating the fruits, mutter. However, lokeach ochel peros aser. If the buyer is the one that is eating fruits, then that's usher because we didn't know who was going to be eating fruits at the time when all of this started. But if it were to have been the mocher, well, then he can sell whatever he can eat. He can eat his product until he sells it, no problem. If the lokeach is eating those fruits and then he gets paid the X that he deserved, then he had X plus all the fruits he ate. Rabbi Yehuda Omer af bizman shelokeach ochel peros mutter. Why? Because we didn't know who was going to be eating the fruits. So he says that's what tzad echad beribis mutter mean. Amalei Rabbi Yehuda ma'isa bebaitus ben zonin she'asa sadeu mecher al pi Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah v'lokeach ochel perosaya. And we see over there that it was absolutely fine. It was tzad echad shel ribis, and it was mutter because we didn't know who was going to eat. Remember, ribis ksut says when we sit down and we're like, hey, Michael, we're going to make a deal. I'm going to give you $100. You're going to pay me back 120. That's ribis ksutza isra deraisa, straight up out of the textbook. But these cases are not like that. These cases have kind of like loose variables. We don't know if anyone's going to eat from the field, but if someone's going to, it might be the mocher. It also might be the lokech. We don't know. So Rabbi Yehuda says that when it's possible that no isser will happen, or possible that an isser will happen, then we ignore even the isser. This is going to be mutter. But the Chachamim did not like that. They argued that no, who says the lokech ate? We don't know what happened in that case of Baitus ben Zonin. So the Gemara wants to know what is going on here with this machlokas between the two. And Abaye says, "My benayu, Amar Abaye, tzadachad beribasi kebenayu." The Rebbe Lazar that the Tanakama, that the Tanakama and the Brisa holds that if the mocher eats the fruits, so then that's totally fine because before I pay, it's my fruit. So when I end up giving you money, then we're good to go. But if the other person's eating the fruit, then it should look like ribis. So the Tanakama didn't like that. Rabbi Yehuda was matir, so that would be the difference between them. And Rava Amar ribis almanas lahachzir ika beinayu. That ribis almanas lahachzir is if one does take ribis and there's a chance that he'll give it back afterwards, namely the lokech in this case because he ate those fruits. If he were to then give it back, what would happen? So the Tanakama would say that that's aser. Ribis almanas, I'm taking the money, but I'm going to give it back. Tanakama says it's aser. Yehuda says it's mutter. Ribis almanas lahachzir. A little reminiscent of returning ribis, which we just discussed yesterday, which according to some isn't even chayav. Welcome to some of the complexities of Paragezu Neshech. Every sugya, this reminds me like the beginning of Psachim, where there's 8 sugyas that are all woven together perfectly, beautifully, but only when you spend a semester in yeshiva learning the first 8 blocks. So here we're seeing a weave of a lot of the sugyas repeating themselves and intersecting in ways that aren't clean. So if we were in yeshiva, we would say, hey, we're going to learn this piece of Gemara, these 2 lines. We're going to compare it to yesterday's blot, and we're going to spend a week on it. and try and figure out how the Rishonim navigate a comparative analysis of these two sugyas. Says the Gemara on the bottom line of Samach Gimel Amar Aleph. Amar Rava. Hashta de Amar Rav Yanai. Now that we know from Rav Yanai that we don't care how a person gets paid back, turning to the top of Samach Gimel Amar Beis. Mali hein umali dmeihen amrinan. That we don't care how a person gets paid back. So if that's true, then we should also say Mali dmeihen umali hein nami amrinan. That even if he only has money to buy the product, that would also be totally mutter. So what that means is I give you money. You lend me $100. I say, please give me back wheat, and you have only cash. That's okay. Uposken al ashar, says the Gemara. Shebashuk, you just agree to the market value of the day. Ve'afal pi she'ein lo. And here's a chiddush, right now, a tweak. Rava is touching up our Mishnah. He's saying ve'afal pi she'ein lo, even if you don't have it on you right now, that if we're being posek al ashar shebashuk, under certain circumstances, you are allowed to have this transaction, even if the money is not with you right now. And that's a difference between dollars and product. With dollars, if you don't have it with you, that's okay. But with product, that leads to an issue of ribis. And the Gemara says that's not so simple. Third line of Samach Gimel Amud Beis, Esvei Rav Papa v'Rav Huna b'Red Rav Yoshua l'Rava. We had said, Kulam im yeshlo mutter im einlo aser. How, Rava, can you say that with money, that even if he is einlo, that goes against our whole Mishnah, that goes against Rava, that goes against Rav Oshaya? How can Rava, you yourself, go against yourself? You just said a second ago, Rava, that on the last page, you said that we have to make sure that if there is no product, that's when we have the Isser D'Rabbanan of Ribis. And over here, you're saying on the top of the page, based on what was his name? Excuse me, based on Rav Yanai, that Mali Dmehen Mali Hain Nami Amrina Nu Poskin Al Shar Shabashik V'Alfish Enlo. Even if you don't have the cash, it still works. How can you say that? The Bryce said him Enlo Aser. Amar Lahu. Rava responds to them and says, guys, you got to remember your party lines, and we also have to hold on to this. These are big anchors. Hasam Halva Hachazvini. When we're talking about a halva, that's when we run into these issues. The din of Rav Yanai was not talking about a loan. And therefore, afal pisha ein lo is okay. When you're talking about a regular business transaction, that's fine. But when you're talking about a loan, it's not fine. Rabba v'Rav Yosef Damrei Tarvahu, they both asked a question. My taima amru rabbanon poskin al shar shebashuk v'afal pisha ein lo. Why is it that the rabbis said that you're allowed to be posek al ashar shebashuk even if you don't have? Same question. The Amarle, after all, they could argue shkilu tivusach v'sha'ja achizrit. We've had this line in Shas before a good few times. If you look up in the top corner here or on the side for the older Gemaras, it says Shabbos, Beisa, Ksubis, Bava Kama. This is a line we've seen before. Take your goodness and go throw it on the thorns. Namely, you're not doing me any favors. My ahanisli. If it would have had my own money, I would have done this for even cheaper. Poskin al ashar, you're worried about me paying you market price right now. You're not even helping me, so that's not considered a hana. So says the Gemara, I buy the Rav Yosef. If that's true, then we should be able to make a loan of sa'abisa, which is an Isser D'Rabbanan. We've discussed this before. I am not allowed to loan you one sa'a on January 1st, and you pay me back on the 10th of January with a sa'a. The market's going to change. That's an Isser D'Rabbanan. Even though it's not Ribis Ktsutza, I'm not telling you that I want you to pay me back more. I only want one sa. But the one sa is more value in 10 days. So according to the Svara of Shkilu Tivusech, V'Sha'ja Achizri, it should be that sa b'sa is mutter. If I would have kept the sa on my own property, would it have been any worse? Mishum de Matzia Amarle, in the case of sa b'sa, when I lend you a sa and you give me one back, Shkilu Tivusech V'Sha'ja Achizri, I'll go throw it on the thorns. Damarle, Chati de Kirchi Ba'ach Labain. I could have, would it have spoiled in my own shelf? Let's say I never lent you the sa. What would I have in my shelf? A sa. So if I lend you a sa and you pay me back a sa, who cares if you pay me back a sa? Who cares if the market value is different? It's the same thing. Shkilu tivusach v'sha'ja achizri. The Gemara gives the same exact answer. Amar lehasam halva. When we talk about the Isser D'Rabbanan of sa, that's talking about a loan. Hachazvini. But in the cases that we were discussing earlier, those were talking about sales. The Gemara just adds in a logistical issue that when we are dealing with a marketplace, There's going to be a middleman. You're going to go there with like your agent or your broker. He's going to make the deals for you. Amarle, yeah, the kayoiv lanami, yeah, you have to pay him too. Absolutely, we're not going to ignore that. And you're right that it will change my costs, 100%. But he doesn't consider that to be a problem. And Ravashi Amar, no, the safsira really can be sidelined. Ravashi Amar, Zuzi de Inshi Inhu Avdele Safsi Ruse. Your money can function as your middleman. Namely, if you walk into a bank and you're holding $1 million in cash, who comes out to take care of you? The manager, the most chashuv person in the building. Why? You don't need all the tellers. All right, things get much more efficient when you're the guy holding the cash. So the same thing is true here. If you walk into the shuk and you're holding the money, the owner of the shuk is going to come take care of you. So that's what the Gemara says over here to answer up a whole bunch of small questions within the world of Rabbi Yanai and within the world of Rabba. Says the Gemara, Rabba Rav Yosef, we're just about halfway down at the two dots, and we're gonna be going until 5 or 6 lines before the bottom of the page. Rabba Rav Yosef, if I make a deal with you for literally the sharp market value, which is AKA the early market value, right after things are harvested, then if I want to make a deal with you, I have to show up at your threshing floor, at your granary. That's the only way. I physically have to be there. So it's Gemara, why do I have to be there? Lamai. If the reason why you want me there physically, when we're dealing with the lower cost of the market, atara charifa halokani, by showing up does not make a kinyan. Your physical presence doesn't cause kinyanim anywhere in life. That's just not how kinyanim are done. If what you want to say is I'm now obligated in mishapara, which we learned about a while ago, which is that curse that whoever cursed those bad people are going to curse you too if you don't keep your word. We learned about that extensively. Once you're chayiv, you're chayiv. Showing up doesn't create the set of obligations of mishapara. So what's the point of showing up? Says the Gemara, you're right. But really showing up does create a mishapara. And the guy who's selling things at that lower price, he's selling to a bunch of people. And if you show up, that shows you're interested, and then mishapara applies. And if you don't show up, so then that shows you're not interested, and then there's no mishapara. That's why showing up is important. If I show up to your granary when you're having the lower market, look, that's great. It's a sale. This just happened on Pesach. All the pancake mix was cut in half by the time Chol Moed hit. They were empty in Chul. I was sent around the city to go find some. I bought them at 50 cents on the dollar. Givaldic. But if I tell you that in Shul, that's not the same thing as me going to your store. That's what the Gemara is saying over here. When you're selling at a lower market cost, you can tell me all you want in the shuk, but until you show up at my door, I'm going to sell to somebody else. That's what the Gemara says. That if you show up at the granary, then I, the seller, will know you're serious. That's when we would create a scenario of mishapara. Ve'ilo. If you don't show up, then Amar Le, I'll say to him, no, Amina dishkachas peri deshpiri mididi v'shaklas, that you found other ones that were cheaper or better than mine, and you took it. That's fine. That's fine. There's no mishapara. That's why if you want to buy from me, you have to show up. Says the Gemara, Omar Ravashi, hashta de amris mishum mismach daita. Now that we know that the reason why you have to show up to the granary is because you have to give the seller smichus das to let him know that you're serious. Afilu ashkeche beshuka v'amar le samchadaite. Oh, so then the Gemara extrapolates, and the Gemara says, if we are not at the granary, but I say, Rabbi Yaakov, I'm serious about buying from you. You can be somech on me. That works halachically. Saying the phrase, you can be somech on me, is the same thing as going to the granary, which is very interesting halachically. How binding is it when I say, smichus das, Rabbi Yaakov, you can rely on me? Does that, if you're selling something bizol, you're selling something at cheap, and I say to you in shul, I'm going to buy. So it seems from the Gemara, there's some teeth to that. No transactions have happened yet, but it seems that that's mishapara. That if you do that and but it's a little bit of a stira because the Gemara had said earlier that mishapara only applies with words and money. Here it seems to be that there's only words. Again, we'd have to compare this sugya to last sugya like before. Okay. What?
The word for selling things on WhatsApp groups also.
Private messaging.
Seems to be. I mean, the Gemara says that once we know that showing up creates smichus das, then afilu ashkeche beshuka, even if I find you in a public place, v'amar le samchadaite, and I say to you, I'm going to take it, so then that actually works.
It seems like from Rashi that it's the seller that would have to be shapar.
mean, he puts it up for cheap and you say, what?
If he doesn't deliver it.
And you say, I'm all in, and then he goes home and says, what was I thinking? The prices are much better, and he backs out.
That's even more fair because there's no kinyan, unless you want to say
There's
there's
no
no with a kinyan.
But that's the idea of the Mishpah. If there's a kinyan, I think the kinyan, you go to base them, it's stuck. Ishapara means, you're right, there's no kinyan, there's no sale,
But it's still.
but it's really bad.
Yeah.
If there was a kinyan, then you go to base them, you can get the stuff.
No, it says ichazar bo mocher ika
Right.
limit liya
Right,
b'mishapara.
he goes home and he realizes, what am I giving it away so cheap for?
Which Samcha Daite is this? This is the Samcha Daite in person? Yeah, Samcha Daite, 4 lines into the wide lines of Rashi. The kol chad b'chad, Samcha Daite the kol chad b'chad. V'yoda de aleka samech hai lokeach. The lokeach knows that the mocher is relying on him.
No, the mocher knows the lokeach one. For somebody play high lokeach, if the lokeach, you said you want it, the price is right, I'm in, I wanna buy it.
V'yoda de aleka samech hai lokeach. Why did you read it that way? Say it again.
But the lokeach, the buyer.
There's a lot of he
There's a lot
pronouns.
of adverbs here.
Yeah. V'yoda de aleka samech hai lokeach.
He knows that upon him is relying the buyer. Which is, doesn't translate. The buyer is relying upon it, meaning you said, my gosh, that's a great deal, I am all in.
That means the lokeach is relying on the mocher.
Correct, yeah, correct.
Okay.
And then the mocher goes home and realizes.
Hold on, the
he can get
lokeach
full
is the buyer,
price.
the lokeach is the buyer, and he's relying on the mocher that says, I have a product to sell. And then the lokeach says, so, I'm in, I'm all in.
You can rely, I'm all in, I wanna buy it.
V'schar mekuyam, asiv ein dai tolach, so hilkach, im chazar bo mocher, ika lemit of mishapar. Oh, I learned it incorrectly.
So that's the Mishapar. He goes home, he realizes he offered it at too good of a price.
He sold it to go.
Right, and he wants out.
Mm. So that changes things to your question too. Now we're talking about the mocher, not the lokeach.
In theory, it could go the other way too.
In theory.
But remember,
Because if you were selling a family, I'm gonna
if
come.
the
and-
price is cheap.
It is a
selling
two-way
is
street,
good.
meaning you're willing to sell, I'm willing to buy. It is a two-way street.
Right.
Why isn't the mishapara on the lokeach also?
Well, it would depend on the particular
What's the case in the shuk then? What was that case?
I think it's just the Metzia is when he's selling on the cheap.
You're selling on the cheap, then it's a
When he's
buyer,
selling
then
on
it's
the
a
cheap,
buyer's
the
market.
Seller is more like that.
Yeah, because it's a buyer's
Why
market.
am I selling so cheap?
But why would the mishapara be on the lokeach and not on the mocher? I don't understand. Because you're saying because he has a bigger
It is
Yitzhak.
Mishpar
Who
is
has the Yetzer Hara to back out? The mocher.
Correct.
Uh,
because he's selling on the cheap.
He's selling on the cheap. Right, it does go both ways.
Right, yeah. But in a case.
But I'm confused by all of this because we had said it many days ago when we spoke about mishapara. The mishapara doesn't apply with words alone. Mishapara applied with words.
Smichas das is a new thing.
I know, but there's no coins. That's
agree.
smichas das is
No,
amira.
I agree.
Smichas das is amira. What is that? What does that mean?
No, I agree.
So it's
I
a
hear
steer,
you
it's a
partially.
steer and sugyas, yeah.
Loud and clear, yes.
Okay. Oh no, this is all very complicated.
Mhm.
Amar Rav Nachman, it's the 2 dots. Says the Gemara, Klala de Revisa. Here's a general rule of Ribis. Kol agar natarle aser. Your reward for waiting is typically what's aser. Meaning I give you 100 and now I have to wait to get my money back. So when you get rewarded for waiting, that's usually when we're triggering the Isser of Ribis. That's the Klala de Revisa. Rav Nachman, Haiman de Yoiv Zuza Lakira. A person gave money to a wax salesman, and typically because they they would typically sell 4 items per zuz. But Amar Le, and the guy says, I'd rather have cash up front. Yehivna lach hey, pay me now, and I'll give you 5 instead of 4. So then the Gemara says, Isnahu gabe shari. It's only mutter. This is an application of what we've learned in our Mishnah. It's Rava. It's Rava's understanding of our Mishnah according to Rabbi Shaya. If he has them in stock, then it's mutter. So this is halacha l'maisa. If I'm making a deal with you, I have 4 in stock right now. If you pay me for 5, I'll get you 5, but I only have 4 today. I'll ship you the next one. That might be an Isur D'Rabbanan. That would be the Isur D'Rabbanan of our Mishnah. This solidifies my deep desires to never be a posek. It's just in anything. Less than who gabe aser. But if in fact there's really nothing, there's no stock, so then it would be aser. Says Gemara Pshita. That should be obvious after the last amud. Says Gemara lo tzricha deikale ashrei b'mata. He has it on credit in the city, meaning somebody already owes it to him. But now it's like bein hashmasha. It's not. He doesn't. You're right. He doesn't have it biyadayim, but he has access to it, or I should say, it's on the truck. It's on the way. It's inbound, even though it's not biyadayim. Ma'udetema came into isle ashrei b'mata. Since he has it on credit in the city, it is in the category of it is similar to ad sheyavu b'ni or ad she'emtza mafteach. Right? I will have access to it soon. My son will be home soon and give it to me, or I'm going to get the key soon. Kamashman dekevin demechasre guvaina, because since it's uncollectible, therefore kevin the lesson who dummy. It command lesson dummy. It's as though he doesn't have it. So this is like a very practical case scenario in halacha that comes up based on our Mishnah of what is tarbis. Tarbis is this case where I give you money and I ask you to pay me back in chitim and that. So this is like the first zushtel of the Gemara to a practical case that's real life, where you want to make a deal with me as a seller. Buy 4 shirts instead of 3. Buy 5 shirts instead of 4. I don't have the last one with me. I'll ship it to you. So look over that might actually be an Isur D'Rabbanan. All right, we'll stop right here. And Metzia Hashem will pick up tomorrow night with a blot and a half. Oh gosh.
Not that long.
Oh yeah? Did you see the half? Wishing you all a beautiful night.